The distant wail of a child pierced the pre-dawn silence, jolting Ethan Norwood from his fitful sleep for the third time that night. April 1879 had brought more than spring showers to his ranch in the Texas Panhandle. It had delivered 4 bewildered children to his doorstep, along with a telegram that had shattered his world. Edward passed. Influenza. Children need you now. Ethan rubbed his calloused hands over his face, feeling the 3-day stubble scratch against his palms. At 32, he'd never imagined becoming a father to his brother's children overnight. The youngest, barely 2, was crying again. Mary, James, Sarah, and little Thomas, 4 pairs of eyes that looked at him with a mixture of grief and uncertainty that mirrored his own. "Coming, Thomas," he muttered, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards creaked beneath his bare feet as he navigated the darkened hallway to the small room where the children slept. 6 weeks had passed since they arrived, and Ethan still felt like a stranger to them and to himself. The toddler stood gripping the edge of his makeshift crib, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. When he saw Ethan, his cries intensified, his little body shaking with hiccuping sobs. "Shoo, it's all right," Ethan whispered, lifting the boy awkwardly into his arms. Thomas went rigid, his cries stuttering but not stopping. Ethan bounced him gently, patting his back with uncertain rhythms. "I know I'm not your pa, but I'm trying." The words hung in the dark room, honest and inadequate. The other children stirred in their beds, and Ethan felt a familiar wave of panic. How could he possibly raise these children? He knew horses, cattle, and the unforgiving land, not the delicate workings of a child's heart. As dawn broke over the horizon, Ethan had Thomas balanced on his hip while he attempted to crack eggs into a skillet with his free hand. The 6-year-old twins, Mary and Sarah, sat silently at the table, watching him with solemn eyes that reminded him too much of Edward. 8-year-old James was outside already, stubbornly feeding the chickens despite Ethan telling him to wait. "Uncle Ethan," Mary said quietly, "you're getting shells in the eggs again." Ethan cursed under his breath, then immediately regretted it as the little girl's eyes widened. "Sorry, Mary. You're right." He fished out the shell fragments with clumsy fingers. "You girls want to help set the table?" The twins slid from their chairs without a word, moving in the synchronized way that always unnerved him slightly. They knew where everything belonged better than he did. His brother and sister-in-law had raised them well, with routines and manners that Ethan was desperately trying not to destroy. By mid-morning, Ethan had managed to feed the children, clean up most of the breakfast mess, and was trying to figure out how to get his ranch work done while keeping 4 children alive. His ranch hand, Miguel, was handling most of the cattle, but Ethan couldn't burden him with everything. "James, I need to check the fence line in the south pasture," Ethan said, adjusting his hat. "You think you can keep an eye on your sisters and brother for just an hour?" James squared his thin shoulders. "Pa would have taken me with him." The word stung, but Ethan kept his face neutral. "Your pa was a better man than I am, that's for sure. But I can't take all of you, and I can't leave the little ones alone." "Then I'll stay," James said, his jaw set in a way that was pure Edward. "But when you're older, we'll ride together every day if you want," Ethan promised, ruffling the boy's hair. James ducked away from the touch, and Ethan pretended not to notice. He was halfway to the barn when he saw the wagon approaching. Visitors were rare out here, 15 miles from the nearest town of Clearwater. Ethan squinted against the morning sun, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. The wagon drew closer, and Ethan could make out a woman driving it alone, which was unusual enough to make him wary. She wore a practical dark blue dress and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded her face. Behind him, he heard the children emerge from the house, curious about the newcomer. The wagon came to a stop in the yard, and the woman set the brake before looking up. When she did, Ethan felt something shift in the air between them. She had the kind of face that stopped a man in his tracks not because of any particular beauty, though she was certainly handsome, but because of the quiet determination that radiated from her clear green eyes. "Mr. Norwood?" she called, her voice carrying across the yard with surprising strength. "That's me," Ethan replied, approaching the wagon cautiously. "Mississippi? Emma Keller," she said, gathering her skirts to climb down. "I've come about the position." Ethan frowned, reaching up automatically to help her down. Her hand was warm and work roughened against his. Position? I'm not hiring, Miss Keller. She looked genuinely surprised. But the notice in Clearwater said you were seeking help with household matters and childcare. She gestured toward the children, who were watching from the porch with undisguised curiosity. I didn't post any, Ethan began, then stopped, realization dawning. Miguel, he muttered. His ranch hand must have taken matters into his own hands after watching Ethan struggle these past weeks. Emma Keller straightened her skirts, a look of uncertainty crossing her face. I see there's been some confusion. I apologize for the inconvenience. She moved to climb back into the wagon. Wait, Ethan said, surprising himself. The children do need help. I'm just not sure I can afford. I'm not asking for much, she interrupted. Room and board, and a small wage. Ethan studied her more carefully. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with auburn hair neatly pinned beneath her hat. There was something steady about her that he immediately trusted, though he couldn't have explained why. Do you have experience with children? He asked. A shadow crossed her face. Yes. I was governess to a family in Austin for 5 years. And you're out here in Clearwater now, because I needed a change, she said simply, lifting her chin slightly. And your children need help. They're not mine, Ethan corrected automatically. They're my brother's. He died of influenza last month, along with his wife. Understanding softened her expression. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Norwood. And theirs. She glanced at the children again. Uncle Ethan? Mary had ventured closer, pulling Sarah by the hand. Who is the lady? Before Ethan could answer, Emma crouched down to the girl's level. I'm Miss Keller. I've come to help your uncle look after you, if he'll have me. Can you cook? Sarah asked bluntly. Uncle Ethan burns everything. Emma's lips twitched. I'm a very good cook. Can you make pie? James had joined them, Thomas toddling behind him. Apple, peach, and blackberry are my specialties, Emma replied seriously. Do you know stories? Mary asked. Hundreds. The children exchanged glances, then looked up at Ethan with the first genuine enthusiasm he'd seen from them in weeks. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, feeling cornered but also oddly relieved. I suppose we could try it for a week or two, he said gruffly. If it doesn't work out, I'll leave. Emma finished for him. But it will. There was such quiet certainty in her voice that Ethan found himself nodding. All right then, Miss Keller. Welcome to the most chaotic ranch in the Texas Panhandle. She smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her serious face and made something flutter unexpectedly in Ethan's chest. Thank you, Mr. Norwood. I think we'll get along just fine. Ethan wasn't so sure about that, but as he helped carry her trunk into the house, with all 4 children trailing behind like ducklings, he couldn't deny the first flicker of hope he'd felt since that fateful telegram arrived. Emma surveyed the Norwood home with a practiced eye, noting the dust collecting in corners, the pile of unwashed dishes, and the general air of disarray that suggested a household in distress. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a sturdy table, a worn sofa, and a stone fireplace. Doorways led to what she assumed were bedrooms. It's not much, Ethan said apologetically, setting her trunk down. The children share the room to the right. Mine's on the left. There's a small storeroom off the kitchen that might serve as your quarters, though it will be fine, Emma assured him, though she hadn't seen it yet. After living in a cramped boarding house in Clearwater for the past 3 weeks, any private space would be welcome. The children hovered nearby, clearly eager to show her around, but waiting for permission. Emma smiled at them encouragingly. Perhaps you could give me a tour? They needed no further invitation. James appointed himself leader, with the twins flanking Emma and little Thomas clinging to Mary's hand. This is where we eat and where Uncle Ethan sleeps when he falls asleep in his chair, James announced, gesturing to the main room. Which is most nights, Sarah added helpfully. James continued. Our room has 2 beds. Me and Thomas share one, and the girls have the other. He pushed open the door to reveal a small but tidy room with a window overlooking the eastern pasture. The children's few possessions were neatly arranged, evidence that they'd been raised with care before coming here. And this, James said dramatically, flinging open the door to the promised storeroom, is where the spiders live. Emma peered into the dusty space, which contained a narrow cot, a small table, and shelves lined with preserves and supplies. A tiny window high on the wall would provide some light and air. "James," Ethan admonished from behind them. "It's not that bad. It's perfect," Emma said firmly, stepping inside. "It just needs some attention, like everything else." She turned to the children with a conspiratorial smile. "I'm not afraid of spiders. Are you?" The twins shook their heads vigorously, though Mary's eyes darted nervously to the corners of the room. "Good," Emma said, "because we're going to need brave helpers to get this house in order. Are you up for the challenge?" James crossed his arms. "Why should we clean? We're just fine how we are." Emma recognized the resistance for what it was, not laziness, but fear of more change. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "a clean house is a happier house. And I can't bake pies in a messy kitchen." "Pie does sound good," Sarah ventured. Emma knelt to Thomas's level, where he was hiding partially behind Mary. "What do you think, Thomas? Should we make this house shine?" The toddler stared at her with solemn eyes before offering a tiny nod. "That settles it," Emma declared, standing up. "Mr. Norwood, if you have ranch work to attend to, the children and I can manage here." Ethan looked uncertain. "Are you sure? They can be a handful." "I'm certain," Emma said confidently, though her heart ached at the wariness in the children's eyes. These little ones had lost so much. "We'll be fine." After Ethan reluctantly departed for the south pasture, Emma rolled up her sleeves. "First things first," she announced to her small audience. "Everyone needs a job. James, you're in charge of firewood and sweeping. Mary and Sarah, you'll help me with dishes and dusting. Thomas," she smiled at the toddler, "you can be my special helper." To her surprise, they fell into the tasks with minimal complaint. Emma suspected they craved the structure and routine they'd known before tragedy struck. As they worked, she gently encouraged them to talk about themselves, learning that James loved horses. The twins were inseparable, but had distinct personalities: Mary the dreamer, Sarah the practical one, and Thomas had just started speaking in full sentences before his parents died, but had grown quiet since. By midday, the main room was transformed. Sunlight streamed through newly cleaned windows. The floor was swept, and the dishes were washed and put away. Emma had found flour and lard in the pantry and set about making a simple lunch of biscuits and beans, with the twins eagerly helping. "Miss Keller," Mary asked as they worked, "are you going to stay forever?" Emma measured her words carefully. "I'll stay as long as I'm needed and wanted." "Our mama made biscuits like that," Sarah observed, watching Emma's hands shape the dough. "Did she? I'd love to hear about your mama sometime, if you'd like to tell me." The twins exchanged glances. "She was pretty," Mary offered, "and she sang all the time. Even when she was mad at Pa," James added from where he was whittling a stick by the door. "She'd sing about how men were troublesome creatures." Emma laughed. "She sounds wonderful." "She was," James said, his voice suddenly tight. He stood abruptly. "I'm going to check on the chickens." Emma watched him go, recognizing that the boy's grief was still raw. "The biscuits will be ready when you return," she called after him, not pushing him to stay. Thomas, who had been playing quietly with wooden blocks, suddenly appeared at her side and tugged on her skirt. When she looked down, he lifted his arms in the universal request to be picked up. Emma's heart swelled as she lifted him onto her hip. He immediately laid his head on her shoulder, his small body relaxing against hers. Over his downy head, Emma met the twins' watching eyes. "Your brother gives good hugs," she said softly. "He hasn't let anyone but us hold him since we got here," Mary whispered. The weight of the child in her arms felt both familiar and new, a responsibility Emma hadn't expected to feel so soon. She hugged Thomas gently, wondering what she'd gotten herself into by coming here. When Ethan returned in the late afternoon, he found a scene so different from what he'd left that he paused in the doorway, momentarily disoriented. The house smelled of fresh bread and something sweet. The main room was tidier than it had been since before the children arrived, but it was the sound that struck him most: laughter coming from the backyard. Following it, he found Emma sitting on a quilt spread beneath the old oak tree, surrounded by all four children. She was reading to them from a worn book, her voice rising and falling dramatically as she told what sounded like a tale of knights and dragons. Even James was listening, though he pretended to be focused on carving a piece of wood. Thomas spotted him first, pointing and exclaiming, "Ethan." Emma looked up, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. Welcome back, Mr. Norwood. We've had quite a productive day. I can see that, Ethan said, genuinely impressed. The house looks different. Clean is the word you're searching for, Emma replied with a hint of teasing in her voice. We've made good progress, though there's still plenty to do. The twins scrambled to their feet. Miss Keller made biscuits, Sarah announced. And jam from the berries in the pantry, Mary added. And she's teaching us letters, James said, trying to sound unimpressed but failing. Ethan felt a complicated mixture of gratitude and inadequacy. In one day, this woman had done more for the children than he'd managed in 6 weeks. Thank you, he said simply. Emma nodded, seeming to understand all he wasn't saying. It's nearly supper time. I found a ham in the smokehouse and some potatoes that were still good. You didn't have to cook, Ethan began. It's part of why I'm here, she reminded him, rising gracefully from the quilt. Children, help me gather our things, please. Ethan watched in amazement as they obeyed without argument, even James. As they headed toward the house, Emma fell into step beside him, Thomas now asleep against her shoulder. He's taken to you quickly, Ethan observed. He usually cries when anyone but his sisters holds him. Emma's expression softened as she looked at the sleeping child. Children sense when they're safe. He knows his sisters trust me, so he does too. She glanced at Ethan. How was your work today? Fine, Ethan said, surprised by the question. No one had asked about his day in. Well, years. Found 2 breaks in the fence line and mended them. Checked on the herd in the south pasture. The usual. Emma nodded, genuinely interested. The ranch seems well maintained, from what I've seen. It was my father's, Ethan explained as they reached the house. Edward and I grew up here. When Pa died, I stayed on while Edward went east for schooling. He came back with a Philadelphia wife, Charlotte, and settled in Clearwater as the town doctor. And now their children are back where their father began, Emma mused. There's something fitting in that. Ethan hadn't thought of it that way. I suppose there is. He held the door for her, noticing how naturally she carried Thomas, how the other children orbited around her like she was the sun in their small universe. Miss Keller, I don't know how you did this today, but I'm grateful. It's what I do, Mr. Norwood, she said simply. Now wash up for supper. Everyone needs a good meal after a day's work. The meal that followed was the most peaceful Ethan had experienced since the children arrived. Emma had somehow coaxed conversation from all of them, even shy Mary and reluctant James. She told stories of her childhood in Missouri, making them laugh with tales of her misadventures learning to cook. My first pie, she confessed, was so hard my father suggested we use it as a doorstop. The twins giggled, and even James cracked a smile. But I kept trying, Emma continued, and now I make the best pies in 3 counties. Will you teach us? Sarah asked eagerly. Of course. Every child should know how to cook a decent meal. Boys don't cook, James objected half-heartedly. Ethan surprised himself by saying, I do. Not well, as you've all discovered, but I can manage. Your father was actually quite good at it. Remember those flapjacks he made when you visited last summer? James's eyes widened slightly. You said they tasted like leather. Brothers say things like that to each other, Ethan said with a small smile. But they were good. Edward always was better than me at detailed work. It was the first time he'd spoken so openly about his brother since the telegram came, and Ethan felt a subtle shift in the room as if a door had cracked open, letting in fresh air. After the meal, Emma supervised the children's bedtime routine with efficiency that left Ethan feeling both relieved and slightly useless. He found himself sitting in his chair by the fire, listening as Emma's voice drifted from the children's room where she was telling them a bedtime story. When she emerged, quietly closing their door, Ethan stood awkwardly. They usually fight going to bed. They're exhausted, Emma said, smoothing her apron. It's been an eventful day. Miss Keller, Ethan began, then paused, uncertain how to express what he was feeling. Emma, she corrected gently. If we're to live under the same roof, we might as well use our given names. Emma, Ethan repeated, the name feeling strange on his tongue. I need to be honest with you. I have no idea what I'm doing with these children. Their parents died so suddenly. Edward and Charlotte had influenza for less than a week before they were gone. The children were staying with Charlotte's friend while they were ill, and then they were sent to me. I'm the only family they have left. Emma's eyes filled with compassion. Children are resilient, Ethan. They need consistency, boundaries, and most of all, love. That's just it, Ethan said, sinking back into his chair. I don't know if I can give them what they need. I've lived alone most of my adult life. I wasn't meant to be a father. Emma sat in the chair opposite him, her posture straight but not stiff. None of us knows what we're meant to be until life demands it of us. You're doing the best you can. My best isn't good enough, Ethan admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. That's why I'm here, Emma said simply. To help you give them what they need until. Until what? Ethan asked when she didn't continue. Emma looked away briefly. Until you no longer need my help. Something about her words troubled him, but Ethan was too tired to examine why. Thank you, he said instead. For today? For coming. Emma smiled, and again Ethan was struck by how it transformed her face, bringing warmth to her serious features. You're welcome. Now, if you don't mind, I think I'll retire. Tomorrow will be another busy day. Ethan watched her go, feeling as though something fundamental had shifted in his world, though he couldn't have said exactly what. In her small room, Emma lit the lamp and sat on the edge of the narrow cot. She had cleaned the space thoroughly earlier, but it was still a far cry from the comfort she had known as a governess in Austin. Yet there was something honest about this place, this ranch with its grieving children and their overwhelmed uncle. Emma opened her trunk and removed a small leather-bound journal. Inside were the letters she had kept, the ones that explained why she had left Austin so abruptly. The last one was from Mrs. Hammond, her former employer, informing her that while they had always found her work with the children exemplary, Mr. Hammond felt it best that she seek employment elsewhere. What the letter didn't say was that Mr. Hammond had developed an inappropriate interest in his children's governess, and when Emma had firmly rejected his advances, he had ensured she would not find another position in Austin society. Emma closed the journal and tucked it beneath her pillow. That life was behind her now. Here, miles from anywhere, perhaps she could start fresh. The children needed her, and Ethan Norwood, for all his gruff uncertainty, seemed like an honorable man. As she prepared for bed, Emma tried not to think about the way Thomas had fallen asleep against her shoulder, or how Mary had slipped her small hand into Emma's as they walked to the house. She couldn't afford to become too attached, not when her position here was temporary by its very nature. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was the image of Ethan's face, transformed by a rare smile as he talked about his brother, that followed her into dreams. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised Ethan with its ease. Emma rose before dawn each day, preparing breakfast before he even made it to the kitchen. The children gradually became less solemn, more like the lively youngsters they must have been before tragedy struck. James still maintained a certain distance, but even he had started to respond to Emma's gentle persistence. Ethan found himself lingering over meals, enjoying the conversations that Emma somehow orchestrated to include everyone. She had a gift for drawing people out, for making even the mundane tasks of ranch life seem interesting when recounted at the dinner table. And did you find all the strays? She would ask, genuinely interested in his answers. Did the new calf take to its mother? She would remember to inquire days after he'd mentioned a difficult birth in the herd. It had been years since anyone had paid such attention to the details of his life, and Ethan found himself speaking more than he had in ages, just to see the focus in Emma's green eyes as she listened. On the 15th day, Ethan returned from checking the western boundary to find Emma sitting on the porch, mending one of James's shirts while the children played an elaborate game in the yard involving a rope, several sticks, and rules that seemed to change by the minute. They look happy, Ethan observed, settling beside her on the porch step. Emma smiled, her needle flashing in the afternoon light. They're healing. Children do, faster than adults sometimes. Thanks to you, Ethan said. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up that day. You would have managed, Emma replied, but there was a pleased flush to her cheeks that made Ethan want to continue praising her. Not like this, he insisted. They trust you. Even James is starting to come around. Emma tied off her thread and snipped it with small scissors. He's protecting himself. He's old enough to understand what he's lost, and he's afraid to risk caring about someone new. Ethan nodded, watching the boy organize his sisters in some new configuration of their game. I know something about that. Emma glanced at him, a question in her eyes. After our mother died, Ethan explained, I didn't want to get close to anyone. Edward was different. He was always more open, more willing to take chances with his heart. And you? Ethan shrugged. I had the ranch. It was enough. Was it? Emma asked softly. Before Ethan could answer, Thomas broke away from the older children and toddled toward them, arms outstretched. Emma, up. She set aside her mending and gathered him onto her lap. What is it, sweetheart? Story, Thomas demanded, settling against her. Another one? I've told 3 already today, Emma said, but her arms tightened around the boy affectionately. Please, Thomas said, adding his newest word with exaggerated politeness that made both adults smile. Very well. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who lived in a big forest. Ethan watched as Emma spun a simple tale for Thomas, her voice rising and falling with the narrative. The other children gradually abandoned their game to gather around, drawn by the magic of her storytelling. In that moment, with the late afternoon sun gilding Emma's auburn hair and the children clustered around her like eager chicks, Ethan felt an unexpected pang of longing. Not just gratitude for her help, but something deeper, a wish that this arrangement could be permanent, that Emma could stay and make his house a home forever. The thought startled him so much that he stood abruptly. I should check on that mare that's about to foal, he said, though he'd already done so that morning. Emma looked up, a question in her eyes, but she nodded. Supper will be ready at the usual time. Ethan retreated to the barn, needing space to examine the feelings that had ambushed him. It had been less than 3 weeks since Emma arrived, yet he couldn't imagine the ranch without her now. The children adored her. He admired her, but admiration didn't explain the way his heart quickened when she smiled at him, or how he found himself thinking of things to tell her throughout his day. You're being a fool, Ethan, he muttered to himself as he checked on the pregnant mare. She's here to help with the children, not for you. Yet as he worked, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Emma, her competent hands, her quiet strength, the way she hummed to herself when she thought no one was listening. By the time he returned to the house for supper, he had resolved to guard his growing feelings carefully. The last thing he wanted was to make Emma uncomfortable and risk her leaving. What Ethan didn't know was that Emma was fighting a similar battle with her own heart. As May bloomed across the Texas landscape, Emma found herself becoming more attached to the Norwood family with each passing day. The children had worked their way into her heart with alarming speed. Thomas with his cuddles, the twins with their earnest questions, and James with his rare but meaningful moments of trust. And then there was Ethan. Emma had come to admire his quiet strength, his dedication to the children despite his uncertainty, and the gentle way he spoke about his late brother. She had noticed the small kindnesses he performed without drawing attention to them, leaving wildflowers on the kitchen table, carving a small horse for James, always making sure she had enough lamp oil for reading in the evenings. Emma knew she should maintain professional distance. Her position here was temporary by its very nature. Once the children were settled, and Ethan was more confident in his role as their guardian, she would no longer be needed. Becoming too attached would only lead to heartache. Yet she couldn't help but notice the way Ethan's eyes followed her around a room, or how his hands sometimes lingered when they passed dishes at the table. There were moments when their eyes met, and Emma felt a current of something unnamed pass between them. On a warm Saturday in late May, Emma decided to tackle the garden that had gone wild since Charlotte's death. The previous owners had planted roses, lilacs, and various herbs, but weeds had taken over in recent months. Can we help? Mary asked, watching as Emma gathered tools from the shed. Of course, Emma replied. Gardening is always better with friends. Soon all 4 children were involved, with even James participating without complaint. Emma showed them how to identify weeds, how deep to plant the vegetable seeds she'd purchased in town, and how to water properly. My mama had a garden, Sarah said as she patted soil around a tomato seedling. But it was in town, not like this one. I bet it was beautiful, Emma said. Did she grow flowers or vegetables? Both, Mary answered. She said flowers feed the soul and vegetables feed the body. Your mother was very wise, Emma said, her throat tightening at the casual way the children were now able to mention their parents, a sign of healing that both gladdened and saddened her. They worked through the morning, and Emma was so absorbed in teaching Thomas how to gently water the newly planted seeds that she didn't notice Ethan approaching until his shadow fell across the freshly turned earth. "Looks like you've been busy," he observed, surveying their work. Emma looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. "The children are natural gardeners. Uncle Ethan, look," Sarah called, proudly displaying her dirt-covered hands. "I planted carrots. And I found a worm," Thomas announced, holding up the squirming creature. Ethan crouched down to admire their work, and Emma felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest at the sight of his genuine interest in the children's accomplishments. "I thought we might have a picnic lunch," Ethan said, surprising everyone. "It's too fine a day to be indoors." "A picnic?" Mary's eyes widened with delight. "Miguel's wife sent over some of her tamales," Ethan explained. "And there's lemonade." The children cheered, and Emma felt a surge of affection for this man who was trying so hard to bring joy back into their lives. "What a wonderful idea," she said, rising and brushing soil from her skirts. "Children, let's wash up at the pump." As they enjoyed their meal under the shade of the old oak tree, Emma couldn't help but feel that they resembled a real family. The thought both pleased and troubled her. This wasn't her family, no matter how much she might wish otherwise. "Miss Emma," James said, interrupting her thoughts, "do you think the vegetable seeds will grow before you leave?" The question hung in the air, and Emma felt Ethan's gaze on her face. I'm not sure when I'll be leaving, James," she answered carefully. "But you will leave," he pressed, his young face serious. "Everyone does." The pain behind his words was unmistakable, and Emma's heart ached for him. Before she could respond, Ethan spoke. "James," he said gently, "Miss Emma has agreed to stay as long as we need her. And right now, we need her very much, don't we?" James looked down at his plate. "I guess." "I promise you, James," Emma said, reaching out to touch his hand. "I won't leave without making sure you're all ready for me to go." The boy nodded, but didn't look convinced. Emma caught Ethan's eye over James's head and saw her own concern mirrored there. Later, after the children were in bed, Emma found Ethan on the porch, staring at the stars. She hesitated in the doorway, but he sensed her presence and turned. "They're asleep?" he asked. "Yes, though James took longer than usual tonight," Emma replied, stepping out to join him. "He's worried about change." Ethan sighed. "He's had too much of it already. Children need stability," Emma agreed, settling beside him on the porch step. "They need to know that some things remain constant, even when the world turns upside down." "Like their home," Ethan said. "I've been thinking about what James said today. About you leaving." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Emma, I want you to know that you have a place here for as long as you want it. The children need you. The ranch needs you." Emma's heart quickened at his words, even as she noted what he hadn't said. "Thank you, Ethan. That means a great deal to me." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night air cool against their skin. Emma was acutely aware of Ethan beside her, the clean scent of soap, the solid warmth of his presence. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said finally. "Something personal?" Emma nodded, though a flicker of apprehension passed through her. "Why did you leave your position in Austin? A governess for a wealthy family must have been a good situation." Emma looked down at her hands, considering how much to reveal. "It was, until it wasn't," she said carefully. "The children were wonderful, the pay was generous, but there were complications." "What kind of complications?" Emma took a deep breath. "Mr. Hammond developed an interest in me that went beyond professional appreciation of my work with his children. When I made it clear that I didn't return his interest, he made my position untenable." Ethan's expression darkened. "He took advantage of his position." "He tried," Emma corrected. "I left before things could escalate. But it meant leaving in a way that made finding another position in Austin impossible." "That's why you came all the way out here," Ethan realized. Emma nodded. "I needed a fresh start, somewhere far from Austin society." "I'm sorry that happened to you," Ethan said, and the genuine anger in his voice on her behalf touched Emma deeply. "But I'm not sorry you ended up here." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and Emma felt that same current pass between them, stronger now. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her hand, or perhaps even kiss her. Her heart raced at the possibility. But Ethan seemed to catch himself, breaking the gaze and looking back at the stars. "It's getting late," he said, his voice slightly rough. We should both get some rest. Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Good night, Ethan. As she rose to go inside, his voice stopped her. Emma. She turned back. Yes. I'm glad you're here, he said simply. Not just for the children. For all of us. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something in acknowledgement that whatever was growing between them mattered to him too. So am I, Emma replied softly, and carried the warmth of those words with her into sleep. June arrived with soaring temperatures and the buzz of cicadas in the trees. The vegetable garden thrived under Emma and the children's care, producing the first tender lettuce and radishes. The rhythm of ranch life had become familiar to Emma, now the early mornings with Ethan heading out to work while she managed the household, the midday meals when he would return briefly, and the evenings spent together on the porch after the children were asleep. Those evenings had become precious to Emma. In the gathering darkness, she and Ethan would talk about everything and nothing: his plans for the ranch, her childhood in Missouri, books they had read, the children's progress. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies rise from the grass. Emma knew she was falling in love with Ethan Norwood. The realization didn't come as a lightning strike, but as a gradual dawning, like the slow rise of the sun she watched each morning from her small window. She loved his integrity, his quiet strength, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words mattered. She loved watching him with the children, seeing how his initial awkwardness had given way to genuine connection. What she didn't know was whether Ethan felt the same. There were moments when she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch, but he never spoke of feelings, never reached for her hand, though she sometimes thought he wanted to. On a sweltering afternoon in mid-June, Emma was hanging laundry while the children napped inside, exhausted from a morning of helping Miguel repair the chicken coop. The heat was oppressive, and Emma had rolled up her sleeves and loosened her collar in a small concession to comfort. She was so focused on her task that she didn't hear Ethan approach until he spoke. You'll get sunburned out here, Emma started, turning to find him watching her from the shade of a nearby tree. I'm nearly finished, she said, reaching for another of his shirts. Ethan stepped forward, taking the other end of the shirt to help her hang it. The children are still sleeping? Yes, the heat tired them out. Emma pinned the shirt in place, aware of Ethan's proximity in a way that made her skin tingle. Did you finish with the new calf? All done. He's healthy as can be. Ethan reached for another piece of laundry, one of Emma's own dresses. She felt her cheeks warm as he handled the fabric with unexpected gentleness. They worked together in silence for a few minutes, falling into an easy rhythm. When the last piece was hung, Emma wiped her damp forehead with the back of her hand. You should come sit in the shade, Ethan said, concern in his voice. You're flushed. Emma allowed him to lead her to the oak tree, grateful for the immediate relief from the sun's intensity. They sat side by side on the ground, backs against the rough bark. Thank you, Emma said, closing her eyes briefly as a faint breeze stirred the leaves above them. When she opened her eyes, she found Ethan watching her with that unreadable expression that always made her heart race. Something felt different today, a tension in the air between them that had nothing to do with the heat. Emma, Ethan began, his voice lower than usual. There's something I've been wanting to ask you. Emma's breath caught. Yes. Before he could continue, James's voice called from the house. Uncle Ethan, Miss Emma, come quick. They were on their feet instantly, alarm propelling them toward the house. They found James at the door, his face pale. It's Thomas, he said urgently. He's burning up and crying. Emma rushed to the children's room, where Thomas lay on his bed, his face flushed and tear-streaked. The twins hovered nearby, their expressions frightened. He woke up crying, Mary explained as Emma laid a hand on the toddler's forehead. He's definitely feverish, Emma confirmed, her heart sinking. She had seen enough childhood illnesses to recognize the beginning of something potentially serious. Ethan, we need cool water and cloths. Ethan nodded grimly and went to fetch the items. Emma turned to the other children. James, take your sisters to the main room. I don't want you catching whatever this is if we can help it. Is Thomas going to die? Sarah asked in a small voice. Like Mama and Papa? Emma's chest tightened at the fear in the child's eyes. No, sweetheart. Thomas has a fever, but we're going to take very good care of him. Now go with James, please. Once the other children had reluctantly left, Emma turned her full attention to Thomas. She removed his nightshirt, noting the heat radiating from his small body. When Ethan returned with water and cloths, they worked together to cool the child, speaking in low voices so as not to frighten him further. "Should I ride for the doctor?" Ethan asked, his face tight with worry. Emma considered the question carefully. "Let's wait and see if we can bring the fever down first. It's a long ride to town, and I don't want you to leave if we don't have to." Thomas whimpered, reaching for Emma with desperate little hands. She gathered him onto her lap, continuing to apply cool cloths to his forehead and chest. "Hurts," Thomas cried, pointing to his throat. Emma examined him gently, finding his throat red and swollen. "It's likely just a summer fever," she told Ethan, "but we'll need to watch him closely." The next hours passed in a blur of worry. Emma refused to leave Thomas's side, even when Ethan offered to take a turn watching him. The fever seemed to lessen with their ministrations, then rise again as the afternoon waned into evening. Ethan managed the other children, explaining Thomas's illness in terms they could understand without frightening them further. Emma could hear him in the kitchen, his deep voice reassuring as he prepared a simple supper for them. By nightfall, Thomas had fallen into a fitful sleep, his breathing rapid but not labored. Emma sat beside his bed, exhaustion beginning to take its toll as she maintained her vigil. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face shadowed with concern. "How is he?" "The fever's still there, but not rising," Emma reported, her voice hoarse from hours of singing softly to soothe the sick child. "I think we're past the worst of it." Ethan crossed to where she sat and laid a hand gently on her shoulder. "You need to rest, Emma. Let me watch him for a while." Emma shook her head. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted," Ethan countered, his tone brooking no argument. "The other children are asleep. I've brought you some tea and bread. Eat something at least." Emma accepted the mug he offered, realizing suddenly how thirsty she was. The tea was sweet and strong, exactly what she needed. "Thank you," she murmured. Ethan pulled up another chair beside her, their shoulders nearly touching in the small space. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "The way you knew exactly what to do, how to comfort him. I would have been lost without you." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, fatigue making her more emotional than usual. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Not anyone. You, Emma. You're special too. To all of us." She looked up at him then, reading in his face something that made her heart flutter despite her exhaustion. "Ethan, when I saw how scared the children were today," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "all I could think was that they've already lost so much. And then I realized that I'm scared, too scared of losing you." Emma's breath caught. "You won't lose me, won't I?" Ethan's eyes held hers, intense in the lamplight. "You came here temporarily. Someday, you'll want to move on, find a better position, perhaps even a husband and family of your own." "What if I've already found what I want?" Emma asked, courage born of exhaustion allowing her to speak the words she'd held back for weeks. Ethan went very still. "Emma, are you saying?" "I'm saying that I care for you, Ethan. For you and for the children. More than I should, perhaps, given my position, but I can't help it." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing, and Emma feared she had misread everything, ruined the comfortable relationship they had built. Then, with gentle deliberation, he reached out and took her hand in his. "I've been trying to find the right words," he admitted, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I'm not good at this, Emma. I've been alone so long. I hardly know how to say what I feel. But today, watching you with Thomas, with all the children, I knew I couldn't let another day pass without telling you that you've become essential to me, not just as help with the children, but as the woman I've come to love." Emma felt tears spill onto her cheeks at his words. "Oh, Ethan." He reached up with his free hand to brush the tears away, his touch feather light against her skin. "I don't have much to offer beyond this ranch and a ready-made family of 4 children who need mothering. It's not what most women dream of." "It's exactly what I dream of," Emma whispered. "A home, children to love, and a good man to share it all with." The tenderness in Ethan's eyes nearly undid her. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it felt like a question. Emma answered by leaning into him, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, where she could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own. When they parted, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he murmured. "Not as our helper, but as my wife. As a mother to these children who already love you." "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll stay." A small sound from the bed drew their attention back to Thomas, who had opened his eyes and was watching them with a drowsy expression. "Emma," he mumbled, reaching for her. She moved to his side immediately, laying a cool hand on his forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart. How do you feel?" "Thirsty," the boy whispered. Ethan was already pouring water from the pitcher, which he handed to Emma. As she helped Thomas drink, she felt Ethan's hand on her back, a simple touch that conveyed so much: partnership, support, love. Thomas drifted back to sleep after drinking, his fever noticeably reduced. Emma sighed with relief, sagging slightly in her chair. "Now will you rest?" Ethan asked, his voice gently teasing. Emma nodded, suddenly too tired to argue. "I'll just close my eyes for a moment." "Come," Ethan said, helping her to her feet. "I'll sit with him. You can take my bed tonight." "I couldn't." "You can and you will," Ethan insisted. "Tomorrow we can tell the children about our decision, but tonight you need proper sleep." Too exhausted to protest further, Emma allowed him to lead her to his room. At the door, he kissed her once more, a tender promise of all that was to come. "Good night, Emma," he whispered. "Good night," she replied, her heart full despite her fatigue. As she sank into Ethan's bed, surrounded by his scent and the knowledge of his love, Emma's last conscious thought was that she had finally found her place in the world, not as a governess or a helper, but as the heart of a family that needed her as much as she needed them. Thomas's fever broke by morning, and within 2 days he was back to his usual energetic self, showing no lasting effects from his illness. Emma watched him playing with his wooden blocks on the porch, marveling at the resilience of children. Ethan had insisted on waiting until Thomas was better before they shared their news with the children. Now, as they prepared for supper on a pleasant evening in late June, the time felt right. "Children," Ethan began once they were all seated at the table, "Miss Emma and I have something important to tell you." For pairs of eyes turned to them with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "Is Miss Emma leaving?" James asked immediately, his fork clattering against his plate. "No, James," Emma said gently. "Quite the opposite, actually." Ethan cleared his throat, looking suddenly nervous. "Miss Emma has agreed to stay with us permanently. As my wife. As your mother, if you'll have her." There was a moment of stunned silence, and Emma held her breath, watching the children's faces for their reactions. Mary was the first to respond, her eyes wide. "Really? Forever?" "Forever," Emma confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. Sarah looked thoughtful. "Will we call you Mother then?" "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable," Emma assured her. "Emma is still fine, or Miss Emma. We don't need to rush anything." James was studying his plate, his expression unreadable. "Do we have to go to a new house?" he asked finally. "No," Ethan said. "This is our home. Nothing will change except that Miss Emma will be part of our family officially." Thomas, understanding little of the conversation but sensing its importance, climbed down from his chair and toddled around the table to Emma. "Emma, stay," he announced, raising his arms to be lifted. Emma gathered him onto her lap, looking to the older children for their responses. "I love all of you very much," she said simply. "I would be honored to be part of your family. Do we get to be in the wedding?" Mary asked, excitement beginning to replace her initial surprise. "Of course," Ethan replied, relief evident in his voice as the twins started to pepper them with questions about the ceremony. James remained quiet, and Emma caught Ethan's eye over the younger children's heads. He nodded slightly, understanding her concern. Later, after the twins had gone to bed full of plans for flower garlands and new dresses, Emma found James sitting alone on the porch steps. She settled beside him, respecting his silence for several minutes before speaking. "It's all right if you're not happy about this, James," she said gently. "Change can be difficult, even good change." James picked at a splinter in the wooden step. "My mother died," he said finally, his voice small. "If you become our mother, it's like we're forgetting her." Emma's heart ached for the boy. "James, look at me," she said, waiting until he raised his eyes to hers. "I would never try to replace your mother. Charlotte will always be your mother, and she will always be special and important. I would just be an additional person to love you. Can you have two mothers? James asked skeptically. I think you can, Emma said. Your first mother gave you life and loved you for 8 wonderful years. She taught you to be the fine boy you are. If I'm lucky enough to be your second mother, I'll try to help you become the man she would have wanted you to be. James considered this, his young face serious. My pa used to say that love isn't like a pie, where if you give a piece to one person, there's less for everyone else. He said love grows to fit whoever needs it. Emma blinked back tears at the wisdom that had been passed from father to son. Your father was absolutely right. And you know what? I think both your parents would be happy that you and your sisters and brother have more people to love you, not fewer. James was quiet for another moment before asking, would you tell me a story about your family? Your first family, I mean. Emma smiled, recognizing the boys need to know her better before accepting her into his heart. My father was a carpenter, she began. He could make the most beautiful furniture you've ever seen. As she talked, James gradually relaxed beside her, even leaning slightly against her arm as the evening deepened around them. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a beginning, and Emma was content with that. When Ethan found them later, James had fallen asleep against Emma's shoulder. Together, they carried him to bed, tucking him in beside Thomas with a gentleness that spoke of the family they were becoming. On the first Saturday in July, Emma Keller became Emma Norwood in a simple ceremony held under the oak tree on the ranch. The nearest pastor had ridden out from Clearwater, along with Miguel and his family, and a few neighboring ranchers who had come to know and respect Ethan over the years. The children had thrown themselves into the preparations with enthusiasm. The twins had decorated the yard with wildflowers and ribbons, while James had solemnly accepted the responsibility of holding the rings. Thomas, dressed in his Sunday best, was content to be held by Miguel's wife during the ceremony, occasionally calling out Emma when the proceedings became too long for his toddler patience. Emma wore a new dress of pale blue, ordered specially from the dressmaker in Clearwater. As she walked toward Ethan, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands and the children flanking her like an honor guard, she felt a happiness so complete it brought tears to her eyes. Ethan, standing tall and handsome in his best suit, watched her approach with undisguised wonder. When she reached him, he took her hands in his grip steady and warm. Dearly beloved, the pastor began, his voice carrying across the ranch yard. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Ethan spoke his vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish Emma for all his days, his voice rang with conviction. When Emma promised the same, she included a special vow to the children as well. I promise to love and guide you, she told them, looking into each face in turn, to respect the memory of your parents, and to be the best mother I can be for as long as I live. Mary and Sarah beamed at her, while James nodded solemnly, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Emma with a tenderness that spoke volumes of his love. The children cheered, even James joining in, and Thomas clapped his hands with delight. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Miguel's wife had prepared a feast, and neighbors had brought additional dishes and small gifts for the new family. As twilight fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, and someone produced a fiddle. Couples began to dance on the hard-packed earth, with the children skipping and twirling among them. Ethan pulled Emma into his arms for a dance, his movements surprisingly graceful for a man who claimed to have 2 left feet. Happy, Mrs. Norwood? He murmured against her ear. Completely, Emma replied, leaning into his embrace. And you? I never thought I could be this happy again after Edward died, Ethan admitted. You've brought life back to this ranch, Emma. To all of us. Over Ethan's shoulder, Emma could see the children playing with the neighbors' children, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Even James seemed to have set aside his usual reserve, engaged in some kind of tag game that had him running and shouting with abandon. They're going to be all right, she said softly. Thanks to you, Ethan replied, his arms tightening around her. Thanks to us, Emma corrected. We're a family now. We'll face whatever comes together. Later, after the guests had departed and the children were tucked into bed, Ethan led Emma to the master bedroom, now their bedroom. He had added a new curtain at the window and a vase of wildflowers on the dresser, small touches that spoke of his desire to make the space theirs, not just his. "I'm not very good at romantic gestures," he said, suddenly shy in a way that endeared him to Emma even more. "You're better than you think," she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "And we have a lifetime for practice." Their first night as husband and wife was a discovery of each other, tender and passionate by turns. Ethan's gentleness gave way to a hunger that matched Emma's own, and in the quiet darkness they found a deeper connection than either had dared to hope for. As they lay together afterward, Emma's head on Ethan's chest and his arm around her shoulders, he spoke of his hopes for their future. "I want to build an addition to the house," he said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare arm. "The children need more space as they grow, and perhaps," he hesitated, "perhaps we might add to our family someday?" Emma suggested, a smile in her voice. "Would you want that?" Ethan asked, a note of wonder in his question. Emma propped herself up to look into his face. "I would love nothing more than to have a child with you, Ethan. A brother or sister for the others." The joy that spread across his features was answer enough, but he pulled her close for a kiss that promised many such nights and many such conversations to come. "I love you, Emma Norwood," he whispered against her lips. "And I love you," she replied, settling back into his embrace. "All of you." As summer gave way to fall, the Norwood Ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. Emma's garden produced a bounty that kept them in fresh vegetables well into October, with plenty to preserve for the winter months. Ethan's cattle herd thrived, bringing a comfortable profit that allowed for improvements to the ranch house. The children continued to heal and grow. James gradually accepted Emma as a permanent part of their lives, even seeking her out for advice or comfort when troubles arose at school, which had resumed in September. The twins blossomed under Emma's guidance, learning not just household skills, but also developing their individual interests, Mary in drawing, Sarah in the practical aspects of ranch management that fascinated her. Thomas, now approaching his third birthday, was talking in full sentences and following his older siblings everywhere. By Christmas, the addition to the house was complete: 2 new bedrooms and a larger kitchen that gave everyone the space they needed. The holiday was celebrated with a fullness of joy that none of them had expected to feel so soon after Edward and Charlotte's deaths. There were moments of sadness, of course, especially when the children spoke of Christmases past, but these memories were now shared without the raw pain of fresh grief. On Christmas Eve, after the children had hung their stockings and finally gone to bed, vibrating with excitement for the morning to come, Ethan and Emma sat before the fire, enjoying a rare moment of peace. "I have something for you," Emma said, reaching for a small package hidden beneath the sofa cushion. "I wanted to give it to you privately." Ethan took the package, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a small leather-bound book. Opening it, he found page after page of Emma's neat handwriting, interspersed with small drawings. "It's a record," Emma explained as he turned the pages, "of the children, of our first months together. I thought it might be important someday for them to have these memories preserved." Ethan's throat tightened as he read snippets of Emma's observations. James's first genuine laugh after the wedding, Mary's delight in discovering she could draw, Sarah's determination to learn to ride astride like her uncle, Thomas's growing vocabulary. Ethan struggled to find words. "This is the most precious gift, Emma." She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I have another gift for you as well, though it won't arrive for about 7 months. It took a moment for her meaning to register, and when it did, Ethan turned to her with wide eyes. "Emma, are you saying?" She nodded, her face glowing with happiness. "We're going to have a baby, Ethan, in early summer." Ethan let out a whoop of joy that he quickly muffled, mindful of the sleeping children. He gathered Emma into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most delicate porcelain. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. The children don't know yet," Emma said. "I wanted to tell you first, then we can share the news with them tomorrow as an extra Christmas gift." "They'll be overjoyed," Ethan predicted, "especially the girls. They've been asking for a baby sister since the wedding. And if it's a boy," Emma teased, "then James will have a brother to teach all the things Edward would have taught him," Ethan said, his voice softening at the mention of his brother. "Edward would have loved being an uncle to all these children." "He is their uncle," Even now, Emma said gently, just as Charlotte is still their mother. We keep them alive in our stories, in the values we teach. Ethan nodded, his arms tightening around her. How did I get so lucky, Emma? To have you walk into my life when I was drowning in responsibility and grief. I believe some things are meant to be, Emma said simply. I needed a family as much as you needed help. We found each other when we needed it most. As they sat before the fire, the stockings hanging from the mantel and the scent of pine from their Christmas tree filling the room, Ethan marveled at how completely his life had changed in less than a year. From a solitary rancher overwhelmed by sudden guardianship of 4 orphan children, he had become the head of a thriving family, with a beloved wife and a baby on the way. Merry Christmas, my love, he murmured, pressing a kiss to Emma's temple. Merry Christmas, Ethan, she replied, nestling closer into his embrace. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the Texas landscape with white. Inside, the Norwood home was warm with the love that had grown there, a love that had been enough for a grieving cowboy, for orphaned children, and a woman seeking a place to belong. A love that would continue to grow, encompassing all who entered its circle for many years to come. The following June, as wildflowers bloomed across the ranch and the vegetable garden flourished under the children's care, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Charlotte Hope, honoring the mother the children had lost while looking forward to the future they would build together. As Ethan cradled his newborn daughter, with James, Mary, Sarah, and Thomas clustered around the bed to meet their new sister, he caught Emma's eye over their heads. The look that passed between them held all the words they didn't need to say, aloud: gratitude for the journey that had brought them together, joy in the family they had created, and love enough to fill their hearts for a lifetime.